DJ LeRoy.
Night Watchman, how you doing, buddy?
I'm well. How are you?
Good, good. Night Watchman, the weather has, it's really spring. We are in spring, okay? So the question to you: have you or have you not yet gotten your bike serviced, or what?
I have not. And how about you? Is yours still in mothballs?
Night Watchman, all I have to do is just put some daggone air in the tires. That's all I have to do.
Okay, so the answer is you're not ready to ride yet either. So this is a great opening for this show because we're going to talk to people who are going to look at us like, how are you guys not ready to ride on a moment's notice?
Hold on. Just because you say that, remember the folks that we are going to be bringing on, not only cycling, but also mass transit, okay, walking, pedestrian plazas. That's all we're talking.
I've been walking. I've been getting in 10,000, 15,000 steps.
Oh yeah, you have the proof on your wrist. Is that what you do?
I have proof on my iPhone.
Right. Well, okay. Well, having said that, you know what? Why don't we bring some folks out here? This is their first time on Soul Lounge Prime Time, and if they're very, very nice, you know what?
They could be invited back to the
exactly. Well, what about somebody I know that she's definitely the advocate for Northern Manhattan and also the Bronx, Anna Berlanga. Bring her out here. Yes.
Welcome, Anna. Welcome
Thank
to
you.
Soul Lounge Prime Time.
Yes, indeed. And like I said, Anna, it's a nice, safe space, and I'm so happy that you're coming in there. I think this is the first time we've actually had one of the real ride advocates, man. Come on. What do you think?
Yeah.
I'm loving this. You know what? But I got to give major props to the woman that made it possible, and that could only be Alexa Sledge. Could only be. Yes. Alexa.
Hello.
All right. Hey. And Alexa, I love the fact that you were able to pivot on a dime. I sent you some clips, of course, of Soul Line Fight. Yes, why not? Let's do it. And Night Watchman, she was on it. Okay. Okay. So
always. She's always on it.
See, yes.
And I love the work you do with Amazon.
See, Night Watchman.
This is a very poor Alexa joke. It didn't land.
Oh, yes.
All right.
Yes.
Sorry.
Please. Alexa, please disregard him. But on that note,
they're not all winners.
No, they're not. Ben, bring up my man who, and by the way, Night Watchman, that James, he doesn't like a lot of folks, but he generally loves Ben Furnas. Bring him up. Right. Yes.
Okay. Welcome.
Hi, good morning, Bob. Good morning, folks. It's really fun to be here.
Oh, man. Great to have you. And of course, this is all about what? TA, Transportation Alternatives. Okay. So I don't have to 50 years and counting.
That's right.
Okay. So please, Ben, for some of those folks who do not know Transportation Alternatives, tell me, what's that all about, man?
So Transportation Alternatives, as you said, is a more than 50-year-old advocacy organization. We've been around fighting for better streets for walking, biking, and public transit for more than 50 years. We've got folks in all kinds of neighborhoods in all 5 boroughs working together with their neighbors to make their streets a whole lot safer, make it easier to get around by bike, and making sure the bus and the subway come frequently and on time. A huge amount of our work is focused on making the streets safer. So, I live in Brooklyn. I've got 2 daughters, 2 and 5. They love to get around on their scooters, and every time they scoot close to that intersection, I get a little nervous.
I hear you, buddy.
And so, what we're really fighting for and advocating for is to make streets places that nobody has to feel afraid to use to get around on, and also where streets are full of life and full of fun and delight and great places for people to come together in their neighborhoods all across the city. So it's really lovely to be here. Curtis, I'm a huge fan of you and your son, and Anna and Alexa are integral parts of the TA family and the TA team, and it's really fun to be here this morning.
Beautiful. Ben, welcome, buddy. Welcome.
Thanks, man. It's great to be here. I just started in January, but I feel like I have one of the great jobs in New York City. I get to go all around, meet people from all different neighborhoods, hear about the things they're thinking about, and fighting the good fights to to make New York City a better place. What could be better than that?
Absolutely. And Ben, because you know I love you, man. So that means that I'm not going to ask you any questions about any elected officials who drive you crazy. I won't require that of you. Okay?
Oh, which elected officials drive me? I love them all. They're all partners in government.
Good answer.
Go. You have learned early. Oh,
And Alexa will tell you I'm sort of pathologically in love with every elected official, even when they don't love me. I don't mind.
Wow.
Okay, that sounds like therapy. So let's leave that alone.
This is not a therapy podcast. I thought this was a therapy podcast.
So I got a question for you guys.
Go ahead. Yes.
Congestion pricing. How's it work?
Yeah. So listen, I was genuinely, I thought it was going to work. Transportation Alternatives has been fighting for this notion that, people who drive into Manhattan, it makes sense to try to reduce the number of cars who are coming into some of the densest and most transit accessible areas in the world. And really strikingly, it's been working incredibly well. I think, as we've seen from other cities across the world that have adopted this, people are quite skeptical, very reasonably, right before it gets switched on. But then it switches on. People maybe shift to trains a couple times a week, or they don't drive in quite as frequently. It doesn't take too many people to make a huge difference of the traffic flow on the streets. We've seen traffic moving much faster over the bridges and through the tunnels into New Jersey. We've seen bus speeds go way up. We've seen streets that are much less dangerous to get around on. One of my favorite stats that we found is along Canal Street, so between the East River bridges and the tunnels. Noise complaints from honking have gone down 70% because there's just there's not intersections that are all jammed up, honking cars driving everybody crazy. And strikingly, we think a lot about the regional impacts of this, and really positively and heartwarmingly, we haven't seen a huge amount of increased traffic, for example, across the Bronx Expressway. People in the Bronx were very reasonably concerned that additional traffic might cause even worse air quality. It's already pretty bad, but we haven't really seen that. So, to be very honest with you, like we would be advocating for this even if it wasn't working quite as well as it has. But I'm extremely heartened that it seems to be working incredibly well. And now it's really just a question of keeping it on, keeping this great program going. Supporting Kathy Hochul, the governor, who's been fighting back against the really short-sighted and mean-spirited attempts by the Trump administration to try to roll it back. As we saw in lots of other places, people were skeptical right before it got switched on. But right now, if you can believe it, 66% of people who regularly drive into Manhattan support congestion pricing because their lives have gotten so much better, because all of a sudden their commutes are predictable, faster. It's less maddening to even if you have to drive into the congestion zone. So, we think it's been working great. We think it's a huge opportunity to rethink the streets of Manhattan. And it's also just nice to see something, an example of government working well and doing something pretty quickly that then makes a really positive difference in people's lives. I feel like that's something that everybody's really hungry for.
Beautiful, beautiful. And, Alexa, please, now you, with comms, controlling the message, right? Making sure that stuff happens a certain way. What have you on the ground? What have you heard and what have you observed
about congestion pricing?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really want to echo a lot of what Ben said about the stats we're hearing about car honking being down, air quality being better. More people are riding the subway, more people are riding Metro North, traffic injuries are down. But of course, all of that is just data. There's also tons of stories that we're hearing on the ground. There's so many people that, for example, ride an express bus from Staten Island or from Eastern Queens into New York City every day. And those people are getting literal hours of their lives back.
Wow.
That's hours people can now spend with their kids, spend on hobbies, spend taking care of their family, so many things like that. And there are hundreds and thousands of these people that are getting so much of their time back. So that's really exciting. Also, the same story coming in from New Jersey. People that do need to drive in, they're being able to get in so much more quickly. And that really is better for everyone involved. And each of those individual stories is really exciting because so many of those people were initially questioning congestion pricing, questioning if it's successful. kind of upset that it might be moving forwards. And then once it actually came into effect, they're seeing not only is this a huge transformative policy, but it's changed their lives and they actually support it now, which is really exciting.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I got to throw this out there because Night Watchman, you did miss a wonderful gathering in Harlem at the Harlem Tavern, okay? We had Anna, we had Ben, we had Sean. Where were you? Were you, too busy driving your Hummer? Is that what was happening?
I think my invitation got lost in the email.
Wow.
Wow. Okay. So we're not going to make sure that happens again, okay? You notice I said that. So, Anna, of course, remember, BX all day. Thank you. Okay. So, and you're not originally from, of course, New York. So you got to tell me about your journey, Anna, and tell me in terms of bike advocacy, safety in the Bronx, how's it going down?
Wow, that's a big question. So, I am originally from Florida, moved to New York City.
Welcome.
In 2007,
Woo.
and was a teacher and an educator for most of that time. And like my bike advocacy started in a really just like random way. It was a nice summer day. I wanted to go ride a bike. I went to my local bike shop in East Harlem on shout out Heavy Metal Bike Shop. And I went into the shop. I was like, hey, you guys have bikes to rent? And he's like, you could rent this bike. And I'm like, do I need a helmet? And he's like, no, you don't need a helmet, which is legally true.
Yes,
and then I went biking, and it was the most exhilarating, but also the scariest thing that I had done in my life. I was like, I remember riding a bike is so much fun. But when I went back to the shop, I'm like, what do you mean I don't need a helmet? Like, what are you talking about? This is scary out there. And it was before the 1st and 2nd Avenue bike lanes got installed. It was before a lot of the bike infrastructure. I mean, I'm sure a lot of your listeners remember that even as early as 2007, all of this stuff wasn't there. Like all of the infrastructure wasn't there. And that day I became an advocate. I Googled stuff. I found TA. I tried to convince my friends to ride, but nobody wanted to ride with me because they perceived the streets as too unsafe. So I found groups of people that were daredevils or whatever it was, and I started biking with them. That's actually how I found my husband in one of the bike.
Wow.
That's a great story.
That is really, really a great story. So I guess one of the other things, I have to just find out, certainly in terms of, I was joking with the Night Watchman, Bikerati. That's the nickname that he has for you guys. So like LeRoy. So a Night Watchman, you care to elaborate on that, man?
Well, first of all, that was the nickname for for a prior edition of Transportation Alternatives. All those people are gone, so no one would have ever heard this if you hadn't brought it up. But it was just an offhand nickname. I love the advocacy work that you guys do, and that's it. It was meant in love.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that clarification. And I gotta say, Alexa, now are you originally from New York?
No, I'm not.
Ooh, so do tell me your journey. Go ahead, you got it.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in Massachusetts, actually, and
nice.
where I grew up, it was very easy to ride your bike, and it was extremely accessible. There were bike paths everywhere. Every kid had a bike. I biked to school. I biked to my friends' houses. It was a lot of freedom you could have as a child because you could get around without your parents, which I think is really rare in most suburbs in America, obviously, and even a lot of people in cities. And so then after college, I moved down to DC for a little bit to work on Capitol Hill. And then after that, during the pandemic, I moved to New York because I wanted to, and I thought I wanted to live in New York, and all my friends were living here and everyone I knew was living here. And then when I got to New York, I quickly realized how dangerous so much was. I was actually up in Harlem. I was living on 122nd Street when I first moved here. And I was walking on 125th every day, and I was walking along the streets around there, and I noticed how unsafe it felt and how dangerous it felt so much. And then I was also working for a New York City elected official. So we were constantly working with different advocacy groups, constantly going to press conferences with different organizations, different goals. And that's when I really learned about TA, was through that side, actually. I met Elizabeth, who still works at
Oh,
TA,
yes.
at Conference Weekend. And that was my first time meeting someone from TA when I was still on Jumani's press team. So
Nice.
I learned more about it, and I was really excited about it. I was really interested in the information, and then I joined TA a little over 2 years ago. So I've been here for a little bit now, and yeah, I've lived in New York for, I guess, around 4 years now, and I feel like I'll stay here for a very, very long time.
Beautiful, beautiful. And now, Ben, I don't know, why did I take it for granted that you're a New Yorker? Are you a New Yorker?
So it's interesting, Curtis. I'm a New York Stater.
Okay.
And I grew up in Ithaca, New York.
Oh, wow.
Which is
nice.
It's a beautiful little town.
Yes, it is.
But the radius. My mom was born in the Bronx. She moved to.
Yay! Love her already. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. But she taught music in the public schools in Ithaca for her career. But I was in the radius such that anybody who referred to the city in Ithaca was talking about New York City. So this was always sort of like the place that I dreamed of moving one day. I finally moved here in 2009, but I spent 8 years working in New York City Hall for then Mayor Bill de Blasio. And I was around seeing a lot of the and helping to push from inside government a lot of the major expansions of the bike network that Anna sort of talked about. I mean, something that's really amazing. Like, I think we have a long way to go before literally any kind of person feels comfortable hopping on a bike to get around New York. But it is a world of difference from what it was even as early as the mid 2000s or even the early 2000s. I mean, there's so many more high quality bike paths, a great bike share system that makes getting a bike much more accessible. And certainly, all the data shows that when you make cities that are safe for bikes and safe for people to get around by bike, it's also a whole lot safer to get around as a pedestrian, a whole lot safer for people to drive around. It just makes much more comfortable, safe, pleasant and appealing streets for everybody. And I think that's something that everybody across New York deserves, and what I love waking up every morning to get to think about and push for.
Nice. And one thing I definitely have to say, okay, because you mentioned it, rideshare, you mentioned it. So having said that, so one of the guys who I used to work with back in my other life, Justin Ginsburg. And so we know that Justin, of course, was City Bike, one of the first early leaders. But man, oh man, there were no damn city bikes uptown, or much less Anna brought the BX.
I know.
Okay, so tell me your thoughts in terms of having an equitable bike share in every borough. I will start with you, Anna. Do tell me.
I mean, I think it's just necessary. I was in East Harlem when it expanded up to East Harlem, and I was working in East Harlem. And sometimes, I'd be a little late to work, and being able to hop on the city bike from where my home was to where my work was, it just made it faster. And now here in the Bronx, so it's not in the East Bronx, which kind of makes the East Bronx not accessible to
less desirable. You're right.
Right. But it is going up to Riverdale and Kingsbridge and all that. So the other day I was visiting my friend in Kingsbridge, and I was like, man, I could have taken a city bike here, because that diagonal connection in the Bronx is, and even just east-west, the east-west connection in the Bronx is incredibly difficult, since so much of our transit is oriented towards Manhattan. I live at 174th and Southern, not to tell everyone I live, but getting to Yankee Stadium, oftentimes Google wants to route me through Manhattan, or getting to Riverdale, I have to be routed through Manhattan.
Crazy.
It's crazy. But with a bike, I can make that commute a lot faster, or I can skip part of the leg, right? So if it's bus, train, I could eliminate one of those buses, which everyone that's taken a bus knows that's key to saving you time.
Gotcha. And Alexa, you cycle, you city bike, you tell me your journey. to and
Yeah.
from work? Go ahead.
I usually take the train. Well, in my old
Mm.
apartment, I did usually bike to work. In my current apartment, I usually take the train.
Mm-hmm.
But now that it's spring, I'll definitely start biking again.
Ooh, okay. Very nice.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like every single mode of transportation in New York has a place in my life. I actually took the ferry last week.
Mm-hmm.
Which is nice. I don't know. They all have a time and a place. And I think that's true about so many people in New York, that they want to pick and choose how they're getting around and where they're getting around, which is
Yes.
why bike share is such a great option. Because so often you want to bike somewhere, but then you're maybe taking the train somewhere, and then you're taking the bus somewhere. And having all these options, having them all be accessible to people, is really transforming how people get around and how easy it is to get around.
Alexa, and with bike share, you don't have to worry about your the fact that we don't have a lot of secure bike parking. So again, when I learned that quick, locking my bike outside and then coming and seeing there was no seat on it.
Oh, oh God! Yes, that is the word. You feel such a violation, such an ego violation. So Ben, you got to tell me your stories in terms of ride shares, so forth.
Oh, sure. So I have a bike myself. I love to use it to get around. I've got 2 kids, so it's often much easier for me to, take a bike share bike just for one leg of my day, and then take the train home to pick them up. But as Alexa said, like, I think it's amazing, and it's a great responsibility of government to make sure that people have lots of different options and lots of different ways of getting around for different parts of our day. And I think bike share and biking, I think the message of transportation alternatives and what we really advocate for is to make sure that everybody has all of these different high quality options of getting around our great city.
Let's
talk about some of those options. So a few years ago, during the beginning of the pandemic, we did a show on micro mobility.
Yeah.
And we featured a couple of companies that at the time were doing different forms of scooter. We had Ravel and Curtis. What was the other one?
I believe it was Lime.
Lime, right? Correct. And so we're years later, and it seems like maybe those efforts haven't really panned out. So where are we on some of those types of micro mobility alternatives these days?
Yeah, I think there was a huge set of companies that really tried lots of different versions. I think some of them didn't fully work out, but I do think you're right that some of them have had staying power. And Anna can talk a little bit about the upright scooter share in pretty large swaths of the Bronx. I mean, that's something that ridership is quite high. It's very popular. It's a great option for a lot of people. I think we think a lot about the bike lanes and the roadbed, and thinking about what types of devices make sense where. The heavier Revel essentially electric motorcycles were things that is a nice option for getting around. But it's a little bit more like a car, like you're in the roadbed with general traffic. Something like an upright scooter, I think it's nice if it's moderately speed. It can go in the bike lane and coexist pretty well with other people on bikes of different types. But again, like it's really just about having a city that lots of different people feel comfortable using lots of different options and ways to get around. And I think part of what we advocate for is to make sure that the infrastructure that exists, so the geometry of the street, literally the sidewalk, the bike lane, the roadbed, there's enough space and it's organized so people feel like it's not so chaotic or confusing, but instead it's really easy and safe to get around in lots of different ways.
I love that. And I want to come to you, but I also want to pick up on that because NightWatchman, when we were there, because I believe we were at the Brooklyn Navy Yard where we were doing some tests. Yes. And one of the things that they had was this geocoding type thing. So let's say, Alexa, because I saw you shaking your head, is that if I go in the wrong direction, it cuts off.
Or if on the sidewalk.
Or in a park. In a park. It cuts off. Yes. I didn't know that rule, and I didn't know that rule, and I was late to work, and I was at 233rd. There's no city bike. I was not near a train. Where I was going was not near a train. I was like, oh, let me grab a Lime. I'm on the Bronx River Greenway. This is like perfect straight shot. It's the Greenway is a bike lane. I can ride there, but no, no, it won't work in the parks,
Wow.
which is good.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. I, of course, am a very responsible scooter user, but they'll cut off in the park.
Wow. Okay. And do tell me. And it's not an abrupt stop.
No.
Oh.
And then the
Okay.
first couple times you ride it, it's also speed limited to I think 10 miles an hour.
Gotcha.
So you don't get first time users like with that, what you say, like jerking motion,
Yes.
or being able to cause themselves injury. So that's pretty good.
Beautiful.
But like to what I was saying is when I've used that, so it's in the Bronx, it's in the Eastern Bronx. And when I've used that service, so the Eastern Bronx, like we just said, doesn't have City Bike, and it has trains. It has the 6 train and
Right.
5 train. But if you look at the map, the trains are pretty far apart, and the trains are the most reliable form of transit. So when I would go, I would tutor a student there in the Eastern Bronx, and like getting to the train was a 20-minute walk, which is like a pleasant walk, except when you're like, oh my gosh, I'm late, I gotta go, or I have to make dinner at home, I gotta go. So being able to hop on the Lime and do a 20-minute walk in 5 minutes or 7 minutes, and get to the train, it is really useful.
So I'm making the assumption because I'm hearing this explosion and I'm hearing Lime there. So it's big in the BX?
Lime and Veo are the ones that are still in the BX. It's
Gotcha.
Ben could probably talk about the policy of it a little bit more, but it was a pilot program. And then it's also piloted in Eastern Queens. So you see the places where transit is further like spread apart, and where you may be relying on buses, which we know are notoriously slow, which is something else we advocate for. So it's in those places to give people an alternative.
And I have to say, okay, so I'm also lived in Co-op City in the Bronx. So that's also one of the areas that has Lime. Alexa, yeah?
Oh, I have actually never ridden one of the upright scooters.
Oh,
I
gotcha.
live so far away from the Eastern Bronx. I would love to, though. They look really fun.
Yeah, yes, they do. They do. And but I like you. I remember the old Rebels where I could sit down and, as you said, Ben, almost like a little motorcycle. I like that. The comfort of that. NightWatchman, what did you think when you were riding the scooter, man?
Well, I mean, I've tried both the Revel scooter, the sit down, as well as the Limes that we tried out in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. I like both for different reasons, But the Limes never made it to Manhattan, so that was the last we saw of them. And I had a Revel account for a little while. But they have disappeared, and I think they're only now doing the Tesla rideshare.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
A lot of the upright scooters are in places where there's not City Bike, so it's like at the edge of the City Bike zone. Then sometimes the scooter share starts.
And that makes sense. Now I've got another question, another trend that we've seen rise over the last few years, and those are the e-bikes. And we have an army of delivery messengers that are now all over the streets on the e-bike. So what are your guys' takes on that, and what are the upsides and downsides of the proliferation of e-bikes?
Yeah, sure. So this is something we think an enormous amount about. It's just as a threshold matter, right? Like this was a workforce and a set of companies that really, expanded dramatically during the pandemic. And I think in a lot of ways, people really saw this workforce as really keeping the city going through some of the darkest times in our history. Being a delivery worker is one of the hardest jobs out there. It's in all weather. People are biking around to bring people food. A huge number of New Yorkers order food or delivery every week. I think making it the case that this new part of our economy, this new set of workers, are treated with dignity, but also that, they're operating in such a way that's safe and respectful to everyone else on the streets. Something I always say is that, people, everybody on the road should be following the rules, but those rules should be safe and easy to follow. And that's why when we think about delivery work and e-bikes, we're really thinking about making sure that the apps, the folks that are sort of deploying and sending the workers out into the streets to make the deliveries aren't expecting or pressuring them to run red lights, go the wrong way up streets, go on sidewalks. Simple things as much as like making sure that the time that they give to customers is accurate and is based on a time that's actually based on following all the rules of the road, rather than something that would pressure people into breaking the rules. We talk to delivery workers all the time, and they're like, we want to follow the rules. We don't want to be pressured. But, sometimes if we're faced with getting a tip or not, being able to hit this target set by our employer or not, it's obviously tempting to try to push the envelope and create situations where pedestrians feel endangered. And that's obviously totally not okay. Another huge piece of this is, as we talk a lot about infrastructure, right? Making sure that every, street has a safe place for a bike to be, right? If I'm on an e-bike and making a delivery, I may be tempted to go on the sidewalk if there's not an obvious safe place for me to be on the roadbed. That doesn't make it okay to go on the sidewalk, but it also suggests that, we really need to be thinking holistically about making sure that, there's safe places for folks to be on the road, and also that the working conditions that these guys are operating under don't pressure them into putting other people at risk and in danger. So, TA is advocating for new regulations from the city council to bring the delivery apps in line and make it a much more professionalized and safe working environment for the delivery workers, and also a much safer environment for those of us who are walking around or even biking in a conventional bike in the bike lane, right? I think we all want much calmer, more safe, more appealing streets, and we can really get that if we take a hard look at the app, the situation that the apps are creating, and also the infrastructure that exists out there on the streets.
Gotcha.
Now, was there an issue in terms of battery fires?
Yeah, so this is something that we obviously took incredibly seriously. There were unlicensed and battery devices that weren't up to code, weren't up to standards, and I think it's probably the case that the standards were a little weak, particularly with imported batteries. So there's a set of things that we're working on at the city council, and also all the way up at the federal level, to make sure that the batteries in these devices that are being bought and sold in the United States and on the streets of New York are safe. And it's another place where there should be a real obligation on the app companies to make sure that anybody who's delivering food, making money for these companies, is operating a device that's safe. Both when it's being driven around and also when you're like charging it at home, or in a lot of we've seen these fires incredibly tragic. A lot of folks who maybe live together in a group house and are charging a bunch of batteries on one extension cord. It's a really bad situation.
Yeah.
And it sort of goes to the importance of really professionalizing this workforce and making sure that the workers and the companies are doing right by their employees. I really think of food delivery professionals as very similar to a guy making a truck delivery or a FedEx worker at UPS. It's like part of the logistics system of the city, and these workers deserve to be treated with dignity and be protected and safe, but also operate safely and respectfully themselves, right? We expect FedEx drivers to follow the rules. We should expect delivery workers to follow the rules, but they need the training and the resources and the support to do that in a safe, dignified way.
Absolutely. And I do remember this, and I'm not sure if it happened around the de Blasio time, but Ben, do you remember when I think it were protected bike lanes being proposed for Adam Clayton Powell, which is 7th Avenue in Harlem, right?
Yeah.
And I'm at Community Board 10. I'm at a meeting, nice and calm. and as you know, Ben, I do occasionally, and James will tell you, I occasionally do cycle myself, no matter what NightWatchman says. But then you had somebody at the meeting say, "Black people don't cycle."
I know.
Heck was this? Yo, Ben. So do tell me, how are we going to actually get through that noise?
Yeah.
And really see that equity in terms of the placement of bike lanes happens in communities like Harlem, the BX, other parts of Brooklyn, because not all of Brooklyn is equal. Okay?
No, it's true.
So tell me.
Yeah, I mean, and I think there's a couple things going on at once. Like, first, I just think there's a huge amount of prejudice and stereotype of who actually does bike or doesn't bike in the city.
Right.
And, I think we have a huge network of great bike groups, unofficial, official, people of all walks of life all across the city who really love biking, love going for exercise rides with their friends or get around, use it for transportation. And almost because of some of this prejudice, we sort of see this vicious cycle where we have some of the highest quality bike infrastructure in neighborhoods that, yes, are a little bit denser, closer to the core, but, tend to be richer, tend to be whiter. And, if we can't expand our high quality bike network to all neighborhoods and all walks of life, you'll see these like slight differences and who feels safe biking, who likes to hop on a bike. But I think there's a huge amount of pent up demand. People I talk to all the time, they say, oh man, I love biking. I remember biking when I was a kid, but it just doesn't quite feel so comfortable in my neighborhood or in this city. But man, if it were a little safer, I would love to get on a bike to get around. And I think those voices, they're not the kinds of people who show up to community board meetings. They're not the kinds of people who go out of their way to support a project. They're kind of just like I would say like a quiet majority of people who are going about their life. But if there really were a great option, if the infrastructure existed, they would be really excited to hop on a bike to get around. So, I think we're fighting against a lot of misinformation about A, who bikes now, and B, who would bike if the infrastructure were a lot better and a lot more convenient. Something I sometimes say or think about is like when we, if we're victorious in all the things we dream about, there will be no such thing as a cyclist. It's not going to be a person. It's just going to be, I'm just a person who lives in New York and I like to get around by bike sometimes because it's a convenient way to get around. And I think that's something that a lot of people would love and people in every neighborhood really deserve.
Beautiful.
Curtis, can I give like a personal story?
Absolutely.
So when I lived and worked in East Harlem, I had a coworker who was born and raised in the Bronx, and we worked in East Harlem together. And she would see me riding my bike, bringing my helmet, and she was one of those naysayers that was like, "What are you doing? I won't say, FCC rules." And she won a housing lottery on 42nd Street and 11th Avenue, which is quite far from the train at Times Square, but very close to the Hudson River Greenway, which is like the gold standard of bike lanes. And the pandemic hit, and she started going on a city bike to work. She moved to a job in West Harlem, so she just had to do that one so she would walk the one block to the river, and then she would ride her bike up, and then she would go to work in East Harlem. And having that safe route that she didn't have when she lived in the Bronx, like it took her, getting a housing lottery in Manhattan to have that safe route.
Wow.
That converted her into a cyclist. And now when we go out for cocktails, I see her with her helmet. And you look at her she's not the spandex clad. She's she's not like that. But it took unfortunately, she had to move out of her home borough to kind of be able to access that safe infrastructure. Central Harlem is the only community board in Manhattan that doesn't have a protected bike lane. And so, when people say that to you at the community board, that's wrong. Just open your eyes, go on out to St. Powell and look who's biking.
Yes.
But it's like Ben says, it can be a vicious cycle. My friend wasn't a cyclist when she lived in the Bronx, but when she got to Manhattan, she became one. And it was just because she had access to safe infrastructure.
Yes. So, Community Board 10, do you hear that?
Don't get me in trouble.
Absolutely. And do tell me, Alexa, what are you hearing on the ground in terms of comments from the average New Yorker? What are they asking for?
In New York City transportation generally?
Yeah,
I think that people want a lot of the same things. I think a lot of what Ben and touched on right now about wanting safe infrastructure is really key. People want safe places to get around. People notice that when there's safe infrastructure for bikes, just like Ben said earlier, it's safer for everyone. It's safer if you're walking down the street. It's safer if you're driving. It's safer if you're taking the bus. And so I think that safe infrastructure is really key. We're hearing a lot about daylighting, which is the practice of removing parking spots closest to an intersection to improve visibility, so that when you're crossing the street, you can see that car coming and the car can see you crossing the street. Or if you're in that car, you can see the pedestrian, you can see the little kid in a stroller, you can see someone on a scooter, and you're just so much less likely to hit them because you can see each other. So it's down in city council, people are working on right now to get forwards. And that's really popular. And then we're also hearing a lot about our bill up in Albany right now that would require speed limiters in the cars of the worst of the worst repeat offenders. Obviously, y'all are familiar with speed cameras, automated enforcement, but obviously it's really effective. The vast majority of people that receive 1 or 2 tickets never receive another.
Wow.
But for a very small number of New Yorkers, they're getting tickets and tickets and tickets and fines, and nothing is happening. There were 2 drivers last year who both got over 500 tickets in 2024. And we know that these drivers that are getting all of these tickets that are repeatedly speeding, those are the drivers that are more dangerous on our streets. So this legislation would require a speed limiter to be installed in their cars so that they cannot drive more than 5 miles per hour over the speed.
Wow. Beautiful. And now, okay, so families for safe streets. I remember there was a comment that they had made, and that we should live in a particular city where there are no accidents. So please, Alexa, tell me exactly what does that mean to you and the average New Yorker? Tell me.
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea is that the majority of things people are referring to on the street as accidents actually aren't. Because if the same thing is happening over and over and over again in the same location, you can't say it's an accident. That is something that is preventable. That is something you know is going to happen. And that's not just a happenstance, a coincidence, an accident. And so there's a big movement, Started by Families for Safe Streets, that we're also a part of, that encourages people to use the word crash, not accident, referring to things affecting cars. And it's been taken up by the AP. AP also says now to use crash, not accident, because so many of these traffic crashes that are happening on our streets are happening at intersections and at locations and under conditions where they happen time and time and time again. And we're seeing this over and over again. So it really just is another reason that we should be making changes, we should be making improvements, because if we make them now, we know that there aren't going to be crashes down the line.
Excellent. And certainly, here it goes. We always hear TA, bikes. The hell with bikes. What else does TA do? Ben, come on, man. Tell me.
TA at its best is an organization that brings people, literally all types of New Yorkers from all walks of life, for better walking, biking, and public transit, and thinking about their streets in really different ways, thinking about the possibilities of what this public space could be used for. So, as Alexa mentioned, we have 2 pieces of legislation we're working on right now. One in Albany that is really designed to slow down really dangerous, reckless drivers. And why do we want to do that? It's safer for people who happen to be biking, but more importantly, it's safer for literally everybody on the street. So if I'm driving in my car at a normal rate of speed and someone zooms by me, that's extremely dangerous. If I'm walking around with my kids and a car zooms through the intersection and runs a red light, we've seen a set of incredibly tragic crashes across the city. So in Midwood, a couple weeks ago, a mother and her 2 daughters were killed just walking across the street. In Harlem, we have a member of Families for Safe Streets who lost his daughter. 13 years old, loved making TikTok dance videos. I mean, this stuff is heartbreaking, right? I mean, people's lives transformed forever just because, in a split second, a driver who was, really shouldn't have been able to go so fast, broke a law and changed the trajectory of someone's life forever. So, we are pushing and advocating for streets to be a whole lot safer, because on a fundamental level, no one should feel like they're putting their life in their hands just to get around their city with by themselves or with their family. And that's a real emotional core of a lot of our work, right? I mean, we come to this because we love the possibilities of the city. We love biking around. We love walking around. We love enjoying great public spaces. We like when the bus comes on time. We like when the train is there right when we get down onto the platform. But we also come from a real set sense of loss often, of people who've lost loved ones, people who died who really didn't need to, and sort of a really righteous fight to make sure that it doesn't happen to other families and other neighbors of ours.
And Curtis, like when Ben says we, he means like the volunteers, we call them activists. And a lot of people have the same story as I do. They like experience something and then they Google like, who can help me with this? So as the Bronx and Uptown organizer, I field questions from like, we do our campaigns based on what people in the community want. So I get an email from a guy in the Bronx who is trying to cross, but there's a lot of highways in the Bronx.
Yes, indeed.
And there's a sidewalk that crosses an off-ramp to one of the highways. There's no light or stop sign or anything. It's just like a yield. And he can't see the cars coming when he's trying to cross with his young son. The cars can't see him. He just wants a bush cut. And he's emailed his elected officials, his community board, his the DOT, the parks department, and no one can cut this bush. So he emails me. He's like, "Can you help me get this bush, like this tree cut, so the cars can see me and I can see the cars?" Or there's a sinkhole in the Fort Washington Greenway that is a persistent sinkhole. So people email us. And then it's my job to get people together and say, okay, how can we solve this problem? Who can we talk to? What are the levers of power? Do we have to make a big petition, or can we just have a meeting and have like a sinkhole fixed? It's really what people in the community are willing to organize around and do. So one of my campaigns right now is Stop the Cross Bronx Expansion. It's not about bike.
Ooh, wow. Okay. Well, now you know Robert Moses. I don't know how you feel about that, but go ahead.
He's rolling over right now.
Alexa sent out an email to our membership as like a bother. I forget what the title was, but I got lots of my friends email forwarding me the email. It was like bother the ghost of Robert Moses.
I'm all for that. He's messing it up for Roberts all over the world.
The Cross Bronx, we know it's a terrible highway. When it was originally built, it displaced 60,000 people. They call the South Bronx Asthma Alley for a reason.
Wow. Yes. And
it's 75 years old, so it needs to be repaired.
Yes.
You know, it's not torn down, repaired. And the way the state is proposing to fix it is to build another highway-sized roadway just south of the Cross Bronx during the duration of construction. And so, again, it's like a coalition of just local groups that are like, you're going to put another highway over the Bronx River, the river that the community has been cleaning.
Where is that going to go? That doesn't even make any sense.
Yeah. You're going to put it right in front of the Bronx River houses, where these people report to us that they can't open their windows because of how much pollution is already in existence. And so we're just advocating for them to fix the roadway the way roadways are fixed in the country. Don't build something else. Just fix it with some lane closures, because we don't want another highway in our community for another 100 years.
Wow. And we're not saying that the union doesn't want the work, okay? But having said that, you know what? I'm going to give TA some major props for collaboration. And one of the collaborations I didn't know about, Jackie Rowe Adams. So please tell me about that. Harlem Mothers Saved. That was beautiful, you know, because you remember losing 2 children to gun violence, and then also you guys recognizing that we have street violence in the form of reckless driving. So tell me about how that came about, man.
Yeah, so I think this is a emotional comparison that we talk about a lot, and it's been really powerful to bring people who've lost loved ones in traffic crashes with people who've lost loved ones to gun violence together. I mean, there's lots of there's obviously a lot of differences, but there's a lot of similarities, right? I mean, these are two very traumatic ways to lose a loved one. It can happen incredibly fast.
Yes.
It happens to people of all ages, young people taken well before their time. It happens in a way that is sudden. They're there one day and they're gone the next. And it's just, and, on some basic level, these things are really preventable in a way that means that pressure on elected officials is incredibly important. So, I think we bring together people who've lost loved ones. It's one of the most powerful and emotional parts of our activism, and bringing that, traffic crash victims together with people who've maybe lost loved ones to gun violence, just to recognize that this is one big fight to pressure elected officials to make our neighborhoods and our communities so much safer and protect the lives of children and keep our families together is just such important and powerful work. Traffic crashes cuts across all different socioeconomic, racial, class, neighborhood lines, right? I mean, this is a problem that affects people from all walks of life, and I think at its best is a type of activism that can bring people together from all across the city in common purpose, which I think is something that people are incredibly hungry for these days.
Nice.
I've got a question for now as the weather is warm, we can expect to see on the weekends every now and then groups of young motorcycle riders riding en masse through the neighborhood. And it's a tricky problem. I don't want to necessarily see over policing of them, but it's definitely not a safe space for a bike rider or a pedestrian when they're running red lights and going for it. So what do you guys position on them?
For me, at least, I think I almost try to think of, like, if I were their parent, how would I feel, particularly with young people, right? Like, I neither want, as you said, sort of over policing that could ruin their life and mess up their future prospects, but also, like, and I like the idea of people being outside with their friends doing things that they enjoy. That's also like meaningful. But like, making sure people have helmets when they're operating on a motorcycle, making sure young people have the training and skills to operate a motorcycle safely. I do think it's important for people to have motorcycle licenses when they use these much higher speed, much faster devices. And I think it's an appropriate role for parents, the whole community, to sort of come together and make sure that people are following these rules. These rules are there for a reason. But I agree with you. It's tricky. Like, I don't want to ruin people's lives in order to save their life, right? That doesn't feel like the right balance. But I think it's something that we at TA and people who care a lot about street safety and who care about our young people, want people to be having fun, but want them to be doing things in a safe way. Goodness knows there's lots of different motorcycle groups, lots of different kinds of people like to ride motorcycles with their friends. And, I think it's not something I'm into, but it's certainly like a lot of people find a lot of meaning in it. And I think even, when I talk to the hardest core motorcycle people, like, they're really into safety because they've lost loved ones. They've lost loved ones to crashes. They do ride out. So they're like, I have my leathers, I have my helmet, I have my lights. I'm always like checking. And I feel like, even with young people who are engaged in this type of thing, like, making sure that they know that even their like cool heroes who are like, have been doing motorcycling for a long time, like, they have tips and tricks to keep themselves and their friends safe while they're doing this thing that A, is risky, but B, people get a lot of meaning and community from. So yeah, I mean, I think it's tricky, but it's not an unsolvable problem, and I think it's important for people to be respectful and be safe.
And Ben, I know on NightWatchman, I was going to say, when I was actually working on an initiative to actually have a motocross type course set up in Randall's Island.
Nice.
However, those young people, they want to be on the avenue. They want to be able to showboat on the avenue where everyone can see them. Yay, look at my skills. Hey, now, so I don't know, NightWatchman, if there's a solution for that, man.
Well, Ben said it's a solvable problem, so I expect he'll have it handled within 2 weeks.
Wow.
we can make some progress.
Okay. Okay, NightWatchman, that was pretty good. That was pretty good. Well, folks, you know what? We are at a lightning round, okay? Which means, well, a couple of things, because we certainly do know that we have coming up on this Sunday, which is always the first Sunday in May, the 5-borough bike tour. Not to be confused with TA. That is Bike New York. And I love Ken, but I have to hear. So, Alexa, tell me the differences. What are the sponsored events that of course, that TA does that people need to know about?
Man, trying to trip me up. I feel like a cool thing about TA, but also a tricky thing for me in answering this question, is that we're constantly changing our events. We have different events every single year, and I've gone to, over just the 2 years I've worked at TA, gone to so many different kinds of events. Just about a month ago, we did the 5-borough pizza challenge. We went to pizzerias in all 5 boroughs. It was an amazing race style situation. You can use public transit, you can bike, you can take the bus, but you cannot use a car. Obviously, ferries have to be involved. You're on a Staten Island. So that was a really fun one. A big one we do every year, or we're bringing back this year, is the Century Ride.
Yes.
September. Nice. And that is 100 miles on a bike, which I'm astounded by people biking 100 miles. I don't know if I could physically do that, honestly.
Well, Alexa, though, we do have some options other than 100, but go ahead, tell me.
Oh, yeah. And then last year we had the half century, which I was at, which was really, really, really fun. And then, of course, TA is also doing lots of events on a regular basis in every neighborhood across the city. So those might not necessarily be fundraising events, but they're accessible to anyone who wants to get involved. We have a bookstore ride coming up soon in Queens that was in the newsletter this week. And I'm sure Anna's also working on some Uptown in the Bronx as well. And we have them at every single borough very regularly. And those are all free to join.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yes, Anna, what do you got for us in terms of some rides that you guys are doing?
Well, unfortunately, I had to postpone the Bronx River Slow Roll, so that's going to come up. I think it got rained out, so in June I hope to do it again. It's a good like novice ride because it's on fully protected bike lanes, except in this one little part where the city needs to connect to the Greenway, but we'll just dismount then. So look out for the Bronx River Slow Roll. This is not a TA event, but it's one that TA heavily supports. Every October, there's the Tour de Bronx, which is the largest free bike ride in sometimes I've heard in the country, sometimes I've heard like in the state, but it's a tradition in the Bronx to do that one. And then we're looking to do a family ride in Harlem in September.
Okay. NightWatchman, no excuses. You hear this now. No excuses, okay? And you see the information right there, okay? But Ben, here we go, man. So there was also a beautiful ride. Remember I told you we used to have an Uptown ride for the Harlem folks, and a number of the folks who you met, you and Anna, and would go up to, let's say, Wade Hill Park in Riverdale. Let's bring it back. But
I feel like Anna and I need to have a conversation about this because I think it's a lovely idea, and it'd be great to get people together.
Beautiful. And what have you got, Ben, in terms of any special things that are going to be happening? I'm very happy that the Century is coming back with options.
And May 15th is Bike Anywhere Day. So we're it used formerly known as Bike to Work Day, but then we realized people bike all sorts of places, not just to work. So it's a great day for people. The weather should be beautiful. Great day to hop on a bike for the first time in the season. We're going to have a station set up in all 5 boroughs to support bike riders, cheer them on as they're biking anywhere they want to go. Lots of opportunities to track your rides if that's something you're interested in, or get more information about campaigns we're running to make biking a whole lot easier and safer and more pleasant in all 5 boroughs and all across the city.
Beautiful. Well, NightWatchman, has this been informative and interesting or what?
Yes, and I also want to make one thing plain. So you mentioned the upcoming 5-borough bike tour, but through the magic of time shifting, it already happened. If you're listening to this or watching, so it was a great day. Everybody enjoyed themselves, and let's do it again next year.
Amen.
Yeah.
I will have been there on Sunday, and I went in, and we had a great time together.
Right. Yeah.
Beautiful day for a ride.
Man, Night Watchman, thank you for pulling me off the cliff. Thank you.
That's all right, man. That's why we have the time machine. We dusted off, the DeLorean in the driveway.
Y'all are so bad.
Flux
So
capacitor.
Well, here's my major question. So the group we have assembled here, are they going to be invited back to the cookout?
As long as they ride there. As long as they ride.
Deal.
Okay, yeah.
It's a deal.
Okay.
Thank you. So Night Watchman, take us home, buddy.
Okay, you've been listening to Soul Lounge Primetime on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. Also live streaming on YouTube and Facebook. You can always find us on Monday night, 7 o'clock on the radio, 8 o'clock on YouTube and Facebook. We want to thank our guests today for sharing their points of view and experience and the great work that Transportation Alternatives has been doing for, what do you say, 50 years?
No, 50 plus and more. That's right.
Okay. All right.
That's
okay.
Right. So this has been a great show. Guys, thank you.
Thank
Alexa, you're the go-to. Ben, Anna, love you guys.
All right. And we're out.